It was a gloomy evening when I finally arrived at the Airbnb after a long day of driving. The house was located at the end of a dimly lit street, surrounded by overgrown trees and abandoned buildings. My initial impression of the neighborhood wasn't promising, but I was too exhausted to care. As I stepped inside, the musty smell filled the air, and the dim lighting added to the eerie atmosphere. The host, a middle-aged woman, greeted me with a forced smile and handed me the key. She seemed a bit odd, avoiding eye contact and speaking in a hushed voice. Trying not to think much about it, I entered the small one-bedroom house. The place was poorly maintained, with creaky wooden floors and peeling wallpaper. I tried to ignore the unsettling feeling and convince myself it was just my imagination running wild. After freshening up, I decided to take a walk to clear my mind. The neighborhood looked even worse at night, and I couldn't help but notice the boarded-up windows and graffiti-covered walls. I felt like I was in a scene from a horror movie, but I brushed off my fear, reminding myself that I was just being paranoid. As I returned to the Airbnb, the night grew darker, and the storm clouds rolled in. I settled into bed hoping for a peaceful night's sleep. But that's when the strange occurrences began. It started with faint knocking sounds coming from what seemed to be the front door. I perked up, listening intently. The knocks were irregular, almost like someone was hesitating to make their presence known. I stayed quiet, not daring to make a sound. The knocking ceased, leaving me with an uneasy feeling. Minutes passed, and just as I was starting to convince myself it was just the wind, the knocking returned. This time, it was louder, more persistent. My heart pounded in my chest and my mind raced with thoughts of who could be outside at this hour. I tiptoed to the window, trying to get a glimpse of whoever was at the door. But the rain was pouring down, obscuring my view. I considered calling the police, but I hesitated, not wanting to overreact to what might be a harmless situation. As I sat on the edge of the bed trying to gather my thoughts, the knocking ceased once again. Relief washed over me and I thought it was finally over. But then, as I was about to lie down, I heard a sound that chilled me to the bone. It was a faint scratching noise, coming from somewhere near the wall. I strained my ears, trying to pinpoint the source. My eyes darted around the room, searching for any sign of what could be causing the sound. That's when I noticed the air vent on the wall. My heart sank as I realized that someone might be watching me through the vent. The thought sent shivers down my spine, and I felt a sense of violation and fear I had never experienced before. I mustered up the courage to approach the vent, expecting to find nothing but darkness. But to my horror, I saw a pair of eyes staring back at me. The sight was surreal, and I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. My mind raced with questions. Who was watching me? How long had they been there? Were they still outside, waiting for the right moment to strike? My fear turned into panic, and I knew I had to get out of there. I grabbed my phone, dialed the police, and explained the situation as best as I could. The dispatcher assured me that help was on the way, and I locked myself in the bathroom, waiting for the police to arrive. The minutes felt like hours as I sat there, listening to the sound of my own heart beating. Finally, I heard the sirens approaching, and a wave of relief washed over me. I opened the bathroom door, and the police entered the house with caution. They searched every corner of the small one-bedroom house, but there was no sign of anyone else. The police officer comforted me, suggesting that it might have been a prank or my imagination playing tricks on me. However, the feeling of being watched never left me. Despite the lack of evidence, I couldn't shake the fear that someone had been watching me from the shadows, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. The officer left, and I was left to spend the rest of the night wide awake, unable to shake the feeling of unease. I decided to leave the Airbnb first thing in the morning, cutting my stay short. As I packed my bags and walked out the door, I couldn't help but feel relieved to leave that creepy place behind. So, my friend and I decided to escape the city and enjoy a peaceful weekend in an Airbnb cottage nestled deep within the woods. The idea of being surrounded by nature and away from the hustle and bustle of daily life sounded perfect. Little did we know that this seemingly idyllic getaway would soon turn into a nerve-wracking and chilling experience. As we arrived at the cabin, we noticed that it wasn't as clean as we expected, but we shrugged it off, thinking maybe the host didn't have enough time to tidy up before our arrival. The allure of the surrounding forest was too tempting to let a little dust dampen our spirits. Eager to explore, we ventured into the woods, marveling at the tall trees and the soothing sounds of nature. The day went by in a blissful haze of hiking and taking in the serene atmosphere. As dusk approached, we decided to head back to the cabin. As we walked back, my friend and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone might be watching us from the shadows. It was probably just our minds playing tricks on us, we reassured each other. After all, it was a remote location, and such thoughts were not uncommon. Upon returning to the cabin, we locked the doors and tried to put our uneasiness behind us. We lit a fire, hoping it would chase away any lingering discomfort. But deep down, we couldn't shake off the feeling of being observed, as if an unseen presence was lingering just beyond the windows. As the night wore on, the wind howled outside, adding to the eerie ambiance. We decided to call it a night and retired to our bedroom, hoping sleep would banish our anxieties. However, we were soon jolted awake by the sound of footsteps outside the bedroom door. My heart raced, and I looked at my friend, who appeared equally terrified. We lay there, frozen in fear, as we felt the doorknob being twisted as if someone was trying to get inside. Panic set in, and we couldn't comprehend what was happening. Summoning up courage, I shouted out, "Who's there?" but received no response. The door continued to rattle as if someone was desperately trying to gain entry. Fear and desperation overwhelmed us as we fumbled to call the police. Within what felt like an eternity, we heard the sound of footsteps retreating, and the doorknob stopped rattling. The presence outside the door had vanished as quickly as it appeared. The police arrived promptly, but upon investigating the area, they found no sign of an intruder. We were utterly shaken by the experience, and needless to say, our weekend getaway was cut short. We left the cabin at first light, feeling an immense relief as the distance between us and that unsettling place grew. Even after returning home, we couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. That weekend left an indelible mark on us, serving as a haunting reminder that even the most peaceful and picturesque surroundings can hide chilling secrets. So there I was, arriving at this remote Airbnb guest house near the eerie forest. The setting seemed tranquil and peaceful during the day, but little did I know what darkness lurked behind those innocent walls. As the sun set and darkness descended, that's when things took a terrifying turn. I was lying in bed trying to sleep when I first heard faint tapping sounds coming from the walls. At first I brushed it off, thinking it was just my imagination or maybe some branches scraping against the house. But the tapping persisted, growing louder and more deliberate, as if someone was intentionally trying to get my attention. The strange noises triggered a feeling of unease, and the pleasant anticipation of my vacation quickly turned into an anxious night of unease. The wind outside howled, but the tapping sounded different, more rhythmic, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was coming from inside the house. Then came the smell, an unpleasant, nauseating odor that seemed to seep into every corner of the guest house. It was a blend of decay and some chemical scent, like a mix of rotting wood and cleaning supplies gone wrong. The smell made my stomach churn, and I couldn't escape it no matter where I went inside the house. As the night wore on, my anxiety grew, and I couldn't sleep a wink. My mind was racing with thoughts about the tapping and the odor, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. To distract myself, I tried reading a book, but every creak and groan of the old house made me jump. The next morning, I decided to talk to the host about the strange occurrences. I tried to approach the topic casually, not wanting to sound paranoid or accusatory. But when I mentioned the noises and the smell, the host's friendly demeanor seemed to change. They quickly brushed it off, saying it must be the house settling or some nearby animals causing the noises. That didn't sit well with me, but I didn't want to make a fuss, so I decided to explore the nearby forest to take my mind off things. However, when I returned to the guest house later, I was startled to find the host unexpectedly standing outside my window, just staring at me. It was like they were waiting for me to return, and I felt a chill run down my spine. As if that wasn't unsettling enough, a while later, a strange man I had never seen before appeared on the property. He was tall, with a scruffy beard and piercing eyes that seemed to bore into my soul. He seemed out of place, and his presence made my heart race. I couldn't help but wonder if he was connected to the weird happenings in the guest house. The tension in the air was palpable, and I knew I had to leave immediately. Without a second thought, I gathered my belongings, practically throwing them into my bag, and rushed to my car. I didn't even take the time to properly lock the guest house. All I wanted was to get as far away as possible from that nightmarish place. As I drove away, my heart was pounding in my chest, and I felt a mix of fear and relief. I knew I had to report the strange encounters to the police, fearing for my safety and the safety of others who might stay at that guest house. When I finally reached the nearest town, I stopped at a cafe and called the police. I told them everything: the tapping, the smell, the strange host, and the mysterious man. They assured me they would investigate, but by the time they arrived at the guest house, both the host and the man were nowhere to be found.